for guys is so addictive.
It is not the problem. It is a problem, a manifestation of a massive problem that we have in society.
People watch for reasons that have nothing to do with sexuality. They watch it for comfort. They watch it for connection. They watch it for a sense of safety, a sense of security.
You stop an addiction and something else comes in. That addiction is a crack that's venting the steam and pressure so you can continue operating. Please talk to me right now. What is missing that porn is coming in and filling? Help the women and the men at home understand what's the gap. Pornography is ruining your chance at happiness. Whether you're a man who's trapped in endless relapses and shame and guilt, or maybe you're that woman who's tired of sitting at the other end of the couch and watching her husband cruise on his phone, knowing exactly what he's doing. Your relationships deserve better than this, but it's not your fault. You are not a bad person. Today, we're talking to Sathiya Sam about exactly why men and some women get pulled into pornography addiction and what's really secretly lying behind that addiction. And then we take this conversation a step further and talk about what you really need to build forward into the identity, into the person that you're meant to be, into a liberated man. Join us for this talk today and find out what it takes to break free forever. Sathiya, one of the biggest problems today for a lot of couples is not how much they argue. It's not the money that they have in the bank. It's not how often they're holding hands and talking about feelings. One of the biggest problems that so many couples are confronting is pornography in their marriage, in their long-term relationships. Women complain about how it feels like they are having to compete with pictures, or they're feeling like it's proof that he doesn't actually like her or care about her. They're wondering why he's doing this in general. Why is he replacing the intimacy with running off in the corner to do this when she's sleeping? And I get this question again and again from my coaching clients. So I'm eager to pull you on here today and have this conversation. A lot of the women in the audience, the women out there, are probably wondering, what is it that is making men so obsessed with these images on a screen that's making it like he's running off to the digital brothel almost like it is. It's so much more accessible through his phone. He can be sitting on the couch with her. So many of my coaching clients say he was sitting on the couch with me watching it 3 hours a day, and I didn't really catch on. I thought he was cheating, and this was almost, I don't know if this is better or worse, they'll say. So can you start us off? What is leading men into pornography when they have a loving woman by their side? What's going on?
I want to say two things. So, the first is we've had over 10,000 people go through our system since we started about 6 years ago. And that question, the answer to that question can actually be distilled into honestly probably two very simple things. I'm just going to put a pin in that for a moment. And I do want to talk to the women because when you probably confronted your guy on it, he said, it's not about you. It's not personal. All the stuff that logically makes sense, but it's probably really hard to hear. And to the women, I just want to say what he's saying is true, but you have every right to be upset about it because he shouldn't be doing it. And I get why you're hurt. Here's why it's not personal though. Okay. And here's why guys ultimately watch porn. Pornography is not about, getting your sexual needs met. It's not about getting a release. Ultimately, people use pornography to satiate deeper needs. And it is the lack of getting these needs met that drive people not just to view pornography once or twice, but to compulsively view it because it is so rewarding, it's so incentivizing, it keeps you coming back again and again and again. And I mean, we're not talking about people who have really poor self-control or something like that. We had a professional athlete many years ago, a name that you'd probably recognize if I mentioned it. And everyone would think this guy's got all the discipline in the world, all the self-control in the world. And he could not, for the life of him, figure out how to not watch pornography. And as we dove into it and we started to work with him, it becomes really apparent, this has nothing to do with your willpower. This has nothing to do with your self-discipline. Dude, he was lonely, he was disconnected, and he was really insecure about his body. Like imagine that, a professional athlete with like the quintessential physique. insecure about his body. So there's deeper fundamental issues at play that are driving people to view pornography, and that's the reality that I think a lot of people are not willing to confront in this conversation. We want to make it just about sexuality. It's more than that.
That's absolutely true. So many of the guys that come in, they say, "Oh, it means nothing to me. It's just this. It's just a thing. It makes me feel better." And yeah, to some extent, right? So the dopamine release, it's that experience of pleasure. It soothes your nerves. One thing that I try to help women understand is they have different outlets for some of that. Pornography for guys is so brain-wise so addictive. But when she gets bored, maybe she needs that dopamine fixation. She goes on Pinterest and she adds like the 9 billionth thing into her Pinterest board. She goes on Amazon if she's like my wife, and she runs through, what can I buy my kids? What are some outfits for my daughters? What are the shoes? And she has like 9,000 different wish lists. Guys don't do that as much. And in the modern world, guys don't have the outlets they should be that might be even more productive. And I'd love to talk to you more about that. But what guys have is, I'm pretty bored. I'm kind of feeling low. I kind of feel this. Hey, you know what's really available? You know what's been advertised? Hey, I'm scrolling through Twitter and oh, look at that. And it just rolls straight in. And it is so easily accessible. It is the worst version of the little dopamine fixations. It's the piece that I don't know if women have an equivalent of it yet. Maybe they do. I'd love to hear from you on that. But it's the more sinister, controlling version of, hey, I'll just scroll Amazon and add things to my wish list. It's so much more than that. Is that matching what you've seen?
Oh, 100%. The conversation about women in this is very interesting. There's the betrayal side of it, which is what we've already tackled, right? You have a woman who feels betrayed by her partner viewing pornography. But the stats would suggest that for every 2 men watching pornography, there's a woman watching. And so I do think that that gap has narrowed, certainly from when I started in 2018. The data was not like that. It was probably more like 10 to 1. Now it's 2 to 1. So women are watching pornography more. And it actually just illustrates exactly what we were discussing a few minutes ago. People watch pornography for reasons that have nothing to do with sexuality. They watch it for comfort. They watch it for connection. They watch it for a sense of safety, a sense of security, whatever it might be. And women have those needs just as much as men. But like you said, the way that they get those needs met may not always be, as sexual or as obvious. Porn is what they call the 3 A's. It's affordable, accessible, and anonymous. And those 3 A's, certainly, they would position a woman to maybe view pornography as a means to cope. But with men in particular, when something is affordable, men love a good deal. Something's accessible, convenience, literally the currency of our culture. And when you can be anonymous about it, man, that is what just sets this thing off like wildfire and makes it very, very hard to kind of break out of those cycles. So I have definitely witnessed exactly what you're talking about.
And I've heard you talk about this before, and it aligns very much with my work when I work with my coaching clients through all my years of working as a therapist, now as a coach, is yes, porn is an issue, but it's not the issue, right? There's things that should be there that are not. There's gaps that are being filled by it, right? 10,000 years ago, men weren't out there saying, you know what I would really like? I'd love to scroll through my smartphone. I hope that gets invented soon so that I can look at pornography here in my cave before I go hunt this mammoth. It's not something that evolved with us as accessibly as it is even today. It's something new that's fulfilling an ancient niche that's there inside our brain. Please, please, please talk to me right now about what is missing. What is missing that porn is coming in and filling? Help the women and the men at home understand what is missing. What's the gap?
Well, this is the question that I was asking myself for, I was addicted to pornography for 15 years. And the first 10 years, I didn't really care that I was addicted. And then I, start to take my life a bit more seriously. I was stepping into a career. I wanted to get married. And I thought, man, I probably need to get this thing taken care of. And the first couple of years that I tried to quit porn, I couldn't. I could go days, maybe a couple of weeks, but I always came back to it. And I honestly thought it was just a conversation about willpower. I thought it was just, if you have enough self-control, if you have enough discipline, you should be good to go. And, I was really starting to get into my faith a lot more seriously at that point. So I also felt like, man, with God on my side and I'm getting into the Bible. Like, what could possibly stop me? And 3 years in, I feel like, man, I've maybe taken 2 steps forward, but I'm still watching pornography with a lot of regularity. And what I ultimately realized is my approach to recovery at that point was the equivalent of, I don't know if you guys ever had to do this when you were younger, but when I was younger, one of my responsibilities at home was to cut the grass. And my parents have a big backyard. And I still remember, it drove me crazy. I'm like, I get OCD about cleanliness and neatness. So there's this little patch of the lawn that's all weeds. And it just looks so bad. There's all this grass everywhere and there's a little patch of weeds. But I was a lazy 16-year-old. So what did I do to get rid of the weeds? I ran it over with the lawnmower, obviously, right? And everything looks clean and tidy and neat. And then, a week later, the weeds are back. They're thicker, they're pricklier than ever. And that is how a lot of people solve porn addiction. They slap on an internet filter. They try to up their willpower. Like I said, I was upping my spiritual disciplines. And these are all the equivalent of running over these weeds with a lawnmower. We all know that if you really want to replace weeds long term, you got to put some gloves on, you got to get on your knees, and you got to dig those suckers out. You got to actually get to the roots of the issue.
What are the roots of the issues of something like pornography? Because this is the part that confuses everybody else. First of all, I'm not sure I agree with you, Adam, that people back, 10,000 years ago didn't have an issue with, sexual expression. They were still going around. There were brothels and every ancient...
I didn't say sexual expression. I meant just looking at pornography itself as a complete, constant, daily, 6 hours a day.
I'm going to have to send you some pictures of ancient Greek statues, but that's for another day.
The cavemen in churches, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we could go down that path, but actually that's why I want to know. So we have this desire by humans to look at other humans. They have an affection for them. They have an interest in them, even in the standpoint of art. But then there's an unhealthy version, which is pornography, and there's a healthy version, which is artistic expression. Oftentimes, people even blend it now. They say, sexual films are a form of artwork. That has penetrated every aspect of our culture, from our digital communities to our idols to even like the red carpet. You see it everywhere, and you have this continuous obsession. But this obsession is fueled by something. So, what is the root cause specifically of that unhealthy desire to behold a human body, especially in that type of act?
Yeah, well, I would actually, I would not say it's an unhealthy desire. I think that's actually where the messaging gets very confused. Because, and especially if you had a religious upbringing like me, that's the message you get is like, your sexual appetite is bad, suppress it, ignore it, and then one day you're going to get married and all of a sudden you're expected to just turn it on and it's going to be amazing. And it just doesn't work that way. Sexual desire is, I believe it's God-given. Sexual desire is a beautiful thing. It's not about suppressing it or stifling it or trying to piece apart what's healthy and what's unhealthy. It's just about embracing it for what it is and learning to manage it. And the better you can manage it, the healthier your decisions become. Now, to circle back to your question before about the root issues, again, I would say I got really overwhelmed when I first started helping people because you had one guy who had sexual abuse in his history and another person who had no real abuse in his history and a really good childhood, but they're both watching pornography. They're watching different types and whatever, but they're all kind of struggling with the same thing. And after we probably helped let's call it our first 1,000 people, we start to kind of identify most root issues fall into one of 3 buckets. The first is a lack of emotional awareness or self-awareness. And this is especially prevalent amongst men. I'm sure you guys can identify, like, nobody really taught us how to deal with emotions growing up, right? It was like emotions are touchy-feely, be a man, suck it up. There is something to be said about maybe not becoming overly sensitive or too effeminate. I think maybe the pendulum has swung a bit too far in some conversations. But most men that we work with are emotionally inept. They have no idea what's going on within them. The second bucket, which gets a lot of press these days, is trauma. So this is wounds of the past. Obviously, the younger, the more impactful typically. We're very fond of a modality in our coaching practice called inner child work. We do a lot of inner child work. We find that's really effective for helping people mend wounds of their past and damaging experiences, all that stuff. And the third, my personal favorite, is identity. And so this is where we're tackling false beliefs, lies that people are believing. There's a lot of adage around addiction that's actually very, very toxic. Like, once an addict, always an addict. Like, what the hell is that? That's not true at all. Of course your identity can shift. The other one, like, hey, I'm Sathiya, I'm an alcoholic. Again, I love 12-step. They have pioneered so much in our space. I'm very grateful for them. I can't get on board with that. I would never want my client to speak that over themselves, that they are an addict. Because if you believe you're an addict, then why would you behave any differently outside of an addictive tendency? So that's a huge part. That's kind of the clinching piece, is really building a new identity that is totally separate from the past, however bad or insidious it might have been.
So how else do these behaviors then manifest, right? Because addiction isn't just pornography. Like, what other type of addictions do you guys work with?
So yeah, pornography is really the tip of the spear. I would say sex addiction obviously goes hand in hand, and we've had a lot of clients. We were working with an addiction physician. Okay, so this guy's gone to school for 10 years to help his clients deal with their own addictions, and he came through our program. And he was a great example of sort of a mesh of the two, pornography addiction, sex addiction alike, often go hand in hand. Another story that we get very often, and this is not with our clients, but we have a big following on Instagram, hundreds of messages coming in a day. And we'll get a lot of stories of people who are like, hey, I was struggling with pornography, but I don't struggle with that anymore. And then, you have a bit of a deeper conversation with them, and you're like, oh, so what do you do? And it turns out that actually they just replaced pornography with alcohol. They replaced pornography with addiction. They replaced pornography with food. I had John Deloney on my podcast recently, and I asked him, what do you think is the worst addiction that somebody could have? And, I knew he wasn't going to say pornography addiction. I was pretty sure, but I was kind of curious to see where he was going to go with it. And he thought about it for a minute, and he said the worst addiction somebody can have is one that's celebrated. Work. Work is probably the most obvious one, but anything that societally we would say, oh, that's an amazing thing, that person's very successful. But those are the addictions that are actually the most dangerous. And people, we work with clients who typically are very high achieving in their professions, in their careers. They are those people who have everything put together. And usually what's kind of on the other side of the coin, one side is the pornography addiction, but the other side is an addiction to work, an addiction to success, to social affirmation. Adam, I know you talk about that a lot. People that have attachment wounds often are suckers for, the social affirmation traps and everything that comes with it. So I would say those are some of the most obvious ones.
Okay. Actually, it's a great question to ask. Adam, what's the connection between attachment and addiction?
I have not yet met any people who are fully immersed in healthy, securely attached relationships where they're getting their daily hugs, their good conversations, their emotional intimacy. And I'm not even talking with a girlfriend or a wife. I mean, with their friends, like being able to hug their buddies. Like, I hug you every time I see you.
Is that therapy?
It is. I'm preventing you from having porn addiction, actually.
Thank you.
It's tactical. But it's been able to spend time with your friends, to have that good conversation, to be immersed, and then to have the serotonin flow so that you are content and feel bonded to other people. When you don't have that, your cortisol is up and you need to feel better. So what are you going to do? Well, dopamine binge. You're going to reach for the porn, or you're going to reach for alcohol. You're going to reach for whatever, or you're going to go back to work and gather some more money, or whatever it is. You're going to do something because there's love and life and things missing. And I loved what you said, Sathiya, about replacing, because that's what I've seen again and again. You stop an addiction and something else comes in. It's just that addiction is a crack that's venting the steam and pressure so you can continue operating. If you plug that gap, another crack's going to open with another vent. Same problem when we throw somebody on anti-anxiety medication and say, keep doing what you're doing, just take this pill every day. They're going to have a different outlet that's going to get worse. They're going to have something else that's the problem. They're going to start having seizures. I've seen that before working with clients. It does not get better until you fully replace the behavior with something that's really optimal for that person. So let's talk to the men and women at home who are listening to this. Let's talk to the women at home right now who are saying, yes, my husband needs to replace that pornography behavior with something else. I want to see him become a man who's leading in this area, who's fulfilled. You're right. It's not just the porn. It's him not sitting with me in the evening and holding my hand, not talking. He doesn't have friends. The guys at home saying, yeah, this is me. I hate my porn addiction. I hate the behaviors. I hate this, but I'm also missing these other behaviors. But everybody right now at home, you're probably drawing a blank. You're probably like, okay, replace with what? What do I do? So, Sathiya, let's even take this a different direction, right? Because there's people out there, and I see a lot of people talking about porn, stop using porn. I've seen a lot of guys in that space. The reason I like you is because you're not just, okay, stop using porn, don't do it. You're out here saying, build something better, become someone who does not need porn. Talk to me. What should the men and women at home be looking for that replacement? What man should he become who does not need porn anymore?
Man, it's so good. Okay, two things. So there was they did an experiment. I'm sure you heard about that. Have you ever heard about the Rat Park study, Rat Park experiment?
Yes, but tell me for the people at home who probably don't know, because it's not well known.
Okay, so Rat Park study basically is you put some rats in a cage. There's two bottles. Okay, one bottle is water, and one bottle is water laced with cocaine. What do you think happens to the rats? They get addicted to the cocaine laced water, obviously. So therefore, cocaine is very addictive. Great. Thanks for the study, guys. So the second part of the study is they put them in Rat Park. Okay, now Rat Park is no ordinary rat cage. This cage has the wheels. It's got the toys. It's got other rats that they can play with and they can mate with. And it's a fun, social induced environment for the rats. Also in Rat Park is a bottle of water and the cocaine laced water. And what they found is that rats, when they were able to play with each other and interact, and sorry, I left out a detail. When they were in the first cage, they were alone. So when they're with other rats, there's things they can do together, some vasopressin bonding. Adam, I know you're all about that. What they found is even though the cocaine laced water was there, they didn't go to it. It's not just that they didn't get addicted to it, they did not go to it. And so the conclusion of this, and this was made popular by a British journalist named Johan Hari about 10 years ago, the conclusion was that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Let me jump in because I love this, because the research shows with millennial groups, right, that 65% of millennials report significant loneliness, and 35 to 45% report significant massive loneliness every day that leads to severe depression and even life-ending sort of ideation. So that's huge. And it's even worse among Gen Z. The rates of loneliness are astronomical. And that's paired in with, for example, things like the massive rise of fentanyl use and the overdose there, the massive drug epidemics that we're seeing across America. It's tied in intricately. As you see loneliness rates go up, you see drug rates go up. So we are exactly mirroring that. And you are 100% on end. Talk to me a little bit more about this, because this is huge.
So you have a downward spiral, right? Because you have disconnection that fuels the misbehavior. It fuels the addiction. But then if you dig a little bit deeper into porn addiction research in particular, is fascinating, but it causes so much dysfunction relationally. They did one study where they were measuring relationship quality on 31 different indicators, and they found that 30 of them were negatively impacted by somebody watching pornography. There was another one where they were actually tracking the activity in the vasopressin and the oxytocin pathways in the body of these viewers. And those pathways started to shut down the more that they viewed pornography. So you literally start to lose this capacity for relationship, and then the cycle continues. Now, that's what causes the addiction. That's what makes it a problem. On the flip side, though, if you can plug in, if you can find places to have meaningful connection and start to build healthy relationships, that is the beginning of all good recovery. That's why for us, when I first started helping guys quit pornography, it was all one-on-one coaching, because I just thought if I could really get in there with guys, work through their individual kind of nuances, that's where I was going to be the most effective. And granted, it was effective. It allowed me to build the system that I've been explaining here that we call Deep Clean. But eventually I maxed out and I couldn't keep up with all the demand one-on-one. So I was forced to do groups, and I felt really bad about it because I thought, man, my clients are kind of getting this, reduced experience, but it's the best I can do right now until I build a team or whatever. And we ran the first group, and it was like amazing because the guys are connecting with each other, and there's an understanding of the challenges they're going through, and they're connecting, right? That connection is happening. And they're literally experiencing healing just from the connection. We hadn't even got into anything yet. It was just the first session. But these guys are connecting, and you can see there's an energy, something shifting just from these guys connecting with each other. So I remember I came out of that first session and I said, I'm never doing anything without groups ever again. And so even now, when we serve with clients, like we do one-on-one and we do groups and we have online community. because that connection piece is so vital. I have a second point, but I'll pause there for a second in case you guys want to add anything.
Yeah, I'd actually want to ask, so how long does it take to get off pornography? How long does it take to conquer an addiction like that with this new interesting addition of group coaching?
If you're looking at research, they'll tell you and it's anywhere from 18 to 48 months. But to be honest, with our clients, we have a 70% success rate within about 4 months.
4 months?
So in about 16 weeks, yeah, your life can really turn around if you apply our system. Because again, our system is, we're getting to the roots, we're getting there with the individual variances. And I would say, yeah, your life can turn around very, very quickly.
I love that. 4 months is, most guys are battling it for 10, 20 years. So 4 months is really good.
Yeah, and that's actually why I want to start digging into it. And it's really interesting what you guys do with pornography. I'm more curious if it's applicable at at a different scale, because pornography is not the only dependency, and as you guys even said, it is not the problem. It is a problem, a manifestation of a massive problem that we have in society. So what is really at the core of such a success, and is it transferable to work addiction, to food addiction, to a dependency perhaps on substances, on alcohol, like all of these other associated problems that we have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the deep clean system that I laid out earlier, it's establish self-awareness, recover from trauma, and shift your identity. Those three things are pretty much applicable to whatever your vice might be. But I will say the clinching piece, what makes the system so effective is the communal aspect. If you just go through it alone, you will get results. But if you really want results that are going to last multiple generations and change your lineage, there's got to be a community element for sure.
And I like that a lot, because also in the bootcamp course that you have, Adam, you talk about building social circles. You have the relationship with self, your inner circle, and your outer circle. Is it the same thing? It's just applied a little bit differently?
Yeah, so I'll be just a little bit personal. I have never had a pornography addiction or anything like this, but a lot of my friends have. And because I've had that strong psychology background, a lot of my personal friends have come to me and said, Adam, can you be my accountability buddy? And I know that the guys who come and get that accountability with me, their rates of success of getting away from it goes way up, because I can, as their friend, step in and say, hey man, what's going on? Like, you told me this and this and this. And if I know their wife or their girlfriend, like, I don't tell her, but I could say, hey, she deserves better than that. And he's like, you're right, she does. That identity component, that who am I going to be? Yeah. Adding that in so that they can be that man for their family is tremendous.
Identity is interesting for men because there's such a strong association with what you do is who I am, that definition of self, exactly as you pointed out in the beginning with Alcoholics Anonymous. I am a porn addict, I'm an alcohol addict, I'm a drug addict, I'm a work addict, I'm a sex addict. This is something that traps people in a belief. And you also use the term limiting belief, Sathiya, but you also started using the term lately online called the liberated man. And there's this idea of liberation and separation from, I guess this is some shackles of your past identity. If you guys can talk to me a little bit more about how do you become a liberated man? What is a liberated man? Even as a concept, that'd be really cool.
Well, real quick, evidence for what you're saying. So the research I've read over the last 10, 15 years has said that if you don't make something part of your identity, you say, hey, I really like these things, or I'm going to do these things, you have maybe a 30 to 40% chance of following through, which actually means a 60 to 70% fail rate. They're like, I want to do this. I will try to do this thing. Yeah, no, you're not going to. But if you make it part of your identity, I am a man of this and this. I am a man who does this. I'm a man who doesn't do this. I do this instead. The research is really cool. You have an 80% success rate on that, which is phenomenal. So making it part of your identity, it doesn't have to be, I am not an addict. It can be, I'm a man who does this, this, and this, and I do not have time for pornography. I am a man who does not have time for pornography is a massive identity boost. So what have you seen be successful for guys for shifting that identity rather than I'm not an addict, I'm not an addict? What are they instead? What are the men who resist the temptation? Tell me that.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the conversation gets really fun because we've been helping guys quit pornography for about 6 years. And in the last 18 months is where I would say we really dialed in. Like, this is where we start to hit the 70% success rate, and we're seeing an exponential increase in our clients' results. So a lot of them have come back after their 4 months with us and they're like, hey, this is awesome. So what's next? We're we're good, you know. And the only thing we were able to offer them was like some more recovery coaching. And they would just say, but I don't want recovery coaching. I'm clean. I'm free. Like there's got to be something next. So we spent the last year, we've been surveying our previous clients. We've been collecting data and basically trying to build out this next step, just identifying where people need help the most, and also where they want to grow, where they kind of want to take their trajectory of their life. And it's interesting because after we surveyed, I thought for sure people were going to come back and say relationships. Like, I got clean of pornography, but my wife still doesn't trust me. That's a story that we hear very often. Relationships ranked. I think it was the second ranking area where guys wanted help. But the first was just personal development. So when we're talking about identity, I think what's happening is you shift your identity where it's like, okay, I'm no longer a porn addict. But an identity that's based on what you're not is not really much of an identity, right? And so I think that's what our first program is accomplishing, where guys are saying, okay, I no longer associate with that person who used to view pornography and had all these terrible habits and this poor belief system and whatever else. And this second program that we're working now is helping guys cultivate an identity that is true to their calling, true to their skills, and true to their passions, and really helping them build a life that is now not just rid of addiction, because the addiction's in the rearview mirror. It's miles behind. It's building a life now that they've always dreamt of, but they couldn't because they were enslaved and they were stuck. They were stuck in their porn addiction. So does that give you a little bit of an idea of kind of how guys are shifting their identity and what it starts to look like?
I love that.
But, but shifting towards what, right? So this is the question, right? It's like, okay, so we're going to go and develop ourselves. We're going to work on liberating ourselves from addiction. Okay, that makes sense. But what else do you have to have as a base in order to be considered free? Because one of the biggest things that guys are scared of often is falling back into something else, especially you have been dependent, you stop being dependent on something. It often leaves you with trauma. It often leaves you with PTSD. It also leaves you with a lack of trust in yourself. And I can tell you most certainly do not feel free at that stage. You're probably feeling more scared than anything. So how do you leave the state of being really dependent, physically dependent, psychologically dependent, and then get to this ultimate goal where you're actually feeling liberated?
Are you asking what that kind of man looks like so that we can see him and visualize what they'll become?
Are there components of this man? Is this something that a man has to build and go through?
So I'm actually fascinated by this, and Sathiya, I'd love to run this by you. Women have feelings. And this is not news to anybody, but why do women have feelings? Why are women constantly assessing the world around them based on how it feels? Why are women looking at men and saying, you make me not feel safe? Why do women look at men and say, I respect that man, but not that man? Why do women look at their husband and say, your porn addiction makes me uncomfortable for so many reasons that I can't articulate all of them? I think actually what we need to talk about right now is what kind of man brings respect from women. And that, I think, is the man who is living in his optimal path, who is free from pornography. Mm-hmm. Full respect from women. Full respect from healthy women.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that, though. Because here's the thing. You cannot be defined exactly what Sathiya says by what you're not. And you cannot be defined based on what women think of you. Right? If you're supposed to be a liberated man, you're supposed to be somebody who's truly kind of independent. You're actually trying to build something. And then women will respect that. But if you're gearing yourself towards just something that women are towards being likable by women, I think that's going down the wrong path.
You're misunderstanding me completely, because the point here is not to make women approve of you. What I'm saying is, let's look at the pieces that actually make women truly in their heart respect a man. That tells us what is the actual proper path for us. Live that on purpose to be that man, not to get their respect. Their respect will come because of that. So what kind of man engenders respect in other human beings? That's more what I'm asking here. So what characteristics is it that engenders respect from men and from women? Not the goal to get respect from people, but to be that man who embodies that respect is earned and demanded because of who he is. How do we get to that liberated man?
I would say there's four things, and these are the four things that are in this new program. This is kind of what we've chunked everything into. The first is character. The idea of character is that you are who you say you are, and you're the same person in public that you are in private. The second is capacity. Guys, I'm telling you, if a guy can figure out how to increase his capacity, manage his capacity, steward his resources well, manage his time, that's going to be a superpower in the next 20 years because we've never been more distracted and dysfunctional than we are today.
Capacity, what, like time? Is it like time management? What is capacity?
Capacity is time management is sort of part of it, but the idea of capacity is understanding how to manage your life internally and externally. And I became a father recently, and becoming a father, you guys are both fathers as well. You would know this. Becoming a father forces you to increase your capacity for relationships, for sleepless nights, for all of that stuff, right? So you have natural capacity enhancers, but the real men who are going to make a difference in our society are the ones who actually go beyond those natural enhancers and actually go out of their way to increase their ability to manage responsibility in particular, but stress, time, everything that comes with it. Third category is connections. So a huge part of what we were just discussing a few minutes ago, right? Community, friendships, romantic relationships, having health and strength in all those areas, very, very important. And then the fourth, and maybe the most misunderstood concept is confidence. So when you have character, capacity, connections, and confidence, I think to me, these are like the four building blocks of a liberated man who is really walking away from his addiction, but stepping into everything that he was made to be.
And all four of those are things that attract women immediately and thoroughly and keep them attracted for life. That's what I meant right there was women will be attracted to that. But that man, he's not living for female approval at all. He's living those four things. He is a fully integrated, liberated man.
Which do you think is the most attractive of those four, Adam? Between character, capacity, connection, and confidence?
I think that character creates the greatest safety for women, and they're looking for it up front, but it has to be backed up by the other components, and especially connections, because connections are social proof that you're capable of maintaining long-term relationships. It's proof that your character is actually real and you're not embodying a fake concept. This is why most women won't date a lone wolf kind of guy who doesn't have family-friend connections. She needs to see that you are coming pre-vetted through multiple other people and that you are who you say you are all the time. It's not her impression of you even that matters. It's everybody around you proving that that's who you are. That's why you can't live for her approval, because you're going to be someone fake. If you are living who you truly are everywhere, then it will come out through your relationship. So you have to have relationships if you even want to be attractive to a woman long term.
So what if we do something like this? And I think it's going to help us really put this into perspective. Sathiya, if you can tell me from the perspective of this liberated man concept, you say, I'm a liberated man, I blank. What would you say?
Ooh, I'm a liberated man and I blank. That's a good one.
That's a great question. So I'm hesitant to answer your question here. So here's why. And we ran into the same issue when we were helping guys quit pornography. There's general principles. There's the deep clean system that I laid out, the 3 different things that are going to help you tackle your root issues. They work across the board. But the deeper you get into the system, the more individual and nuanced it becomes. And in other words, I can tell you, you probably have to address some trauma, but I can't tell you what that trauma is until we just get into the weeds together, right? I am a liberated man, I blank. I can tell you at a broad level, it's the 4 C's that we just discussed. I'm a liberated man. I have character. I increase my capacity. I have meaningful connections. I demonstrate confidence, real confidence, not the stupid red pill macho confidence, but actual confidence. So that I can tell you I can fill in the blank for every single person there. But I think the more you get into the weeds and more nuanced and individual, I think people get to start filling in their own blanks. And, that's going to differ.
Well, and that tracks for men, because men, we define ourselves. As you said greatly a moment ago, men are not defined by how women feel about them. A man has to define himself, and that's true. When I guide my coaching clients through, the first thing I make my men and women do is state their 3 core principles, and they are very different for every person. You must define yourself. That is a core element of becoming.
Perhaps that is the definition of liberated man, is the man who defines himself. Ooh. Now, in accordance with what? And in accordance with whom? And this is actually what I wanted to really ask. You also talk about spirituality a lot. And spirituality answers the identity question very well. So what role does spirituality play in helping you get that success rate that you've mentioned before, like the 70%?
Well, it actually goes back to what we were talking about with connection. Like you can kind of see the theme here, regardless of which subject we're discussing. When people have a spiritual purpose in their life, the rates of recovery skyrocket. They did this like in a study. They did a multivariate analysis. They examined a whole bunch of different subjects to see what correlated the most with somebody watching pornography. And the thing that stood out above the rest was meaningless. So when people felt meaningless or purposeless in their lives, that was when they were the most likely to view pornography, and vice versa. The more they watched pornography, the more purposeless that they felt. So when it comes to spirituality, like even, I'm a Christian, but whether your spirituality is a particular religion, maybe it's a little bit broader, maybe it's not quite as refined, or not refined, but defined or boxed in. Having a sense of purpose of why you're here, why you exist, and what this thing's all about, that's everything. And it's not just because I have a purpose in my life now, I know why I'm here. The reason is the only way that you can actually acquire that is through spiritual connection. It's through connection with God. And so as you forge that relationship with God, you build connection, which we know the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. But then secondly, the byproduct is you get this sense of purpose and meaning in life. And that can really fuel a lot of your development along the way.
What do you think, Adam?
I can only speak to my coaching client experiences and my therapy client experiences over the years. I will say that the easiest clients to fix are the ones that come in and they both have a shared religious faith. Many of them are Christians, so I'll just speak to that. But when they walk in and they're yelling or screaming at each other during fights, I simply look at the man and I say, "Are you a Christian?" He goes, "Yeah, I told you I was." And I said, "Okay. How does a Christian man deal with his wife during an argument?" Well, and he'll kind of start listing it. And I say, "Okay, are you acting like that?" And he goes, "Well, I guess not." And I say, "Okay, well, do you want to? Do you want to continue what you're doing, or do you want to live in this other way that you just described to me?" He goes, "Well, I guess I have to. I have to." He doesn't have another choice. The luxury of continuing his behavior no longer exists for him. When you ask him that, I see it click, and he goes, "You're right. I have to do it." I say, "Great, fantastic. Okay, here's what we're going to do to make sure that you can start doing that more successfully." And it's not a matter of is he going to change? It's how do we make sure that increases that direction. I will say that the opposite is true. The absolute worst couples I've ever worked with, and I don't mean bad people, I mean worst situations where it's a failure rate, where they wash out, is where she has religious faith and he absolutely does not. And he despises it and thinks it's stupid. And then it's almost impossible to get him to change his behavior because he feels 100% fully justified in doing whatever he wants because it's convenient for him and there is no higher calling, there's no accountability, there's no structure there. It's I have to do whatever I have to do to get through. And it's the worst situation. That's what I have seen when I work with couples.
Let me ask you this, Sathiya. What is the connection between an ideal and an identity? Because Christianity and Islam and Judaism, many other religions give you a very strict ideal. Is that what shapes your identity if you follow it?
No, I don't think so. I think that's actually a huge misnomer about faith, because if your ideal was, if you had to reach your ideal for you to establish your identity, you would actually never have an established identity because all fall short, right? Nobody can actually perfectly embody their ideals. That's what makes them ideals, right? The ideal sets a standard. It sets a North Star that we can kind of all point towards. But the whole concept of spiritual identity is predicated on relationship. Like for me personally, and again, with a lot of the clients that we walk through, like if I'm talking through a client who his entire life, he has felt like I'm only as good or I'm only as valuable as my ability to do good, as my ability to perform. So this creates a huge disconnection then when you struggle with porn addiction, because your ideal says, well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's sinful. You're degrading women, et cetera, et cetera. So if your identity and your ideals, if that's all part of the same conversation, then the porn addict is never going to be good enough. But the whole premise, what actually gets somebody out of an addiction, is the realization that despite my addiction, I'm still enough. I'm still accepted and I'm still loved by the living God. And so that the ideals are there. They drive our behavior. They give us something to point towards. But what actually allows us to move forward is not the ideal itself. It's the connection. It's the identity that is apart from our behavior.
You know, guys, while we're talking about this just really popped into my mind, and it was a line in your recent newsletter, Sathiya, and I loved it. And I think it went something like this. So if our need for closeness and connection were fully met by the relationships that we had with others and with God, even thinking about something like pornography would feel sinful. And that really resonated with me because it's just such a good line. But tell me a little bit more of the story and the thinking behind it.
That's a bit cheeky, isn't it? I think that the basic premise here is when you really take your relationship seriously, it's not I need to quit pornography so that I can save my marriage. It's actually I need to quit pornography because I so long to be the best husband I can possibly be to my wife, and I know that it'd be sinful to do anything that would go against that. I remember, when I quit pornography, I was a single man. I had some relationships, one serious relationship while I struggled, but I was single for most of it. And so, to be honest, my most important relationship in that season was my relationship with God. And I remember reaching a place where I felt such a closeness, such a connection with God that I didn't want to watch pornography, not because it would disappoint him, not because it would offend him, but literally because I reached a point in my life where I didn't want to do anything that would harm the closeness that I had with him. So the whole point is you want to become so integrated, so invested in your relationships that not only will you avoid the things that will harm them, but you will do everything in your power to do the things that protect them and strengthen them. And that's kind of the point. When we do the newsletter, because we have a lot of different platforms, the podcast and Instagram, and we're everywhere. But I think in the newsletter is where we try to give people these little tidbits, these little nuggets that they can latch onto that gets a whole concept or a whole story across. So it looks like it's working. I'm glad that one stuck.
Oh, I love that one. That was fantastic. I read those ones several times a week, so it's really good stuff. Definitely subscribe, guys. If you want this type of good information, like truly authentic advice, not just stuff that you get from textbooks, like that's the place to go. That's actually one of the places that I also found Sathiya and his work. So it's quite fantastic. I really encourage it.
Let's put that newsletter link down in the description or in the show notes.
That's a good idea.
If people need an entry level into this, but thank you for providing it.
I do want to ask this though, further this particular answer. You're talking about how your relationship with God has developed and it has led you to this understanding of a truly authentic, real love where you cannot even think about doing something that would be harmful to it. But how did that happen? What took you there? What did it take for you to develop that type of relationships? And what did God do for you that actually allowed you to have that type of faith?
So again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have to answer your questions truthfully. It always comes back to the 3 pillars. So when I think about my relationship with God when I was younger, I lived in a very performance kind of mindset. I was very academic growing up, skipped grade 2, had my honors degree by the time I was 20, 5 figures in research grants. Everything for me was about my academic performance. So as long as I performed well, I felt good about myself. And I translated that into my relationship with God. So as long as I could live by what I believed God wanted of me, I felt like God would approve of me and I would be worthy of love. And that first pillar that we talk about, building that emotional awareness, I kept all of that in my spiritual life. I kept all that hidden. I didn't want God to see my shortcomings. I was too ashamed. I was too afraid of his judgment, of his wrath. So honestly, the biggest thing that helped me actually cultivate this relationship with God where I actually cared about it that much, truthfully, was just learning to open up to him. Instead of, man, I'm really frustrated today or I'm feeling really insecure, instead of just trying to stuff it and move forward with it, just bringing it before God. That's what a beautiful prayer. God, today I'm feeling insecure. I feel really insecure about my, whatever it is, my intelligence, my body, you can fill in that blank. And just learning to, whether God, maybe God speaks to you, you hear something, maybe you end up reading the Bible and you get an answer that way, but learning to just have this lively interaction with him, that's where everything started to shift. But again, those other 2 pillars, very, very important. Trauma holds people back from growing spiritually in ways you can't imagine, because the whole premise of healthy spiritual life is connection, and trauma hinders connection. So again, when I start to work through my traumas, I start to forgive and heal and do inner child work and everything that comes with it, attachment work, a huge part of it. When I start to do that, I'm starting to connect with God differently because those obstructions are out of the way. And then again, the identity piece, we already sort of talked about that. But all of these things working together in my relationship with God, that's when God no longer was just somebody I was reading about. He was somebody that I was actually engaging with.
That's amazing.
Sounds like secure attachment.
Sounds like secure attachment. I was going to ask, how much does that type of relationship translate over to how relationships work between people?
Oh, man. So let me speak really quick to the secure attachment with God piece, because there's two vast misunderstandings in Christianity, right? There was a heresy hundreds of years ago where they said that Jesus died for your sins. So to really honor that, you should sin as much as possible to really get that coverage. And that was a heresy that they rejected during that time. And it sounds stupid to us, but that was a real argument that happened.
You should see
the
the Whatever podcast, man.
Yeah, that was like sin as much as possible. So he gets the value out of having died for you. But you know what? We have the opposite view, and it comes down as a puritanical thing as well. But a lot of the ideas in a lot of churches across America is every time you sin, you are personally hammering the nails into Christ's hand, and he is asking you why, and he resents you for that, and you are failing. And both of those are equally destructive views, I think, of I am failing God, I am a worm, I'm already in it, so I may as well just collapse into it. That's going to lead you into another relapse over and over and over, which is where a lot of Christians get porn addiction wrong. The opposite is something I might offer from love him or leave him, Pope Francis, our current Pope, who said, do not ever be afraid of coming to the confessional and talking about your sins, because the only person you're going to find in there is a loving Father who always forgives. And that's the response I think that we need to have toward God of whatever concept of God we are looking at. Is the love is there. You don't have to sit there and go, I failed, self-flagellate. Or what you need to say is, man, what a missed opportunity. Like, I did this instead of having this amazing, rich experience today over here. Now I have to spend the rest of my day feeling kind of sad. But hey, I'm going to get back on track. I'm going to honor this relationship. This guy wants to spend time with me. God wants to spend time with me. I'm going to pull myself up out of this. I'm going to go jump into that relationship. So when you ask me, what does that look like with other people? Same thing. If a man or woman or if they do something that is hurtful to their relationship, you can sit there and say, I have failed. I am a failure of a husband. I am a failure. I've ruined my family. What kind of man would look at porn like this? Who would? Or you can say, you know what? This is really an indicator of a gap that I have. I should fix this gap and be this man for my family, this man for God, this man for my wife. I should be this person. And then you go do it because it's so good. It feels so good to respond to their love for you and to then be that person that you wanted to be anyway. That's what this is supposed to be. It's a faith, it's a religion of hope, but it's also relationships of hope. It's a family of hope. It's a liberated man is one who has hope.
Yeah. And I if I can challenge it slightly, the one thing I would say is when people deal with shame, you hear the word should a lot, right? Like should statements are often shame statements. And I think the one thing that really helps people is not to say like I should be this person, but actually that's kind of the beautiful thing about the gospel and about Christianity. It's not I should be this person, it's I am this person. And there's parts of me that are interfering with my ability to do that. And that's what I'm going to work through. That's the trauma, building the self-awareness. It's the limiting beliefs. It's, whatever. I'm going to work through these things because I am that person. I think of it like, I was just in Italy for 2 weeks and I was so taken aback by the history and the structures and everything. But the thing that captured me the most was Michelangelo's statue of David. And, again, the quote is debated whether or not he actually said it. It doesn't matter. It's a great quote because he was asked, how did you come up with this concept? How did you do this so intricately? And he said it was actually very simple. I took the marble block and I just removed everything that wasn't David. And I think that's the spiritual journey. It's that everything that's not liberation in our life, we gradually just peel away. If one day at a time we can just trim a little bit more back, we become more and more liberated. And it's not that we should be XYZ or we should do this or we should do that. It's that we are that person. It's just there's a couple things that are holding back our liberation, and we got to chip away at those to step more into it every single day.
One thing, when I went through my schooling to become a licensed marriage and family therapist back in the day, one thing they told me, and I'll never forget my mentor at the time, Dr. Huntley, he came and told me, Adam, when someone has an addictive behavior, they are used to everyone in their life yelling at them, including themselves in their head. They are all yelling at themselves and everyone around them is yelling at them. Don't ever be that guy that yells at them, because then you just get drowned out and they will never listen to you again. He said, instead, be the guy that asks them questions. Be the guy that encourages them. Be the guy that listens and actually is curious.
What questions would you ask an addict?
So one question I ask addicts is, what is that doing for you?
What do you mean?
Well, what is that doing? What is the pornography doing for you? And they have to really stop and think like, well, what is it doing for me besides the obvious? What is it fulfilling? But I've even gone beyond that now in my own work. That's an amazing approach to begin with. But now one thing I've been doing, and maybe this is controversial, but when somebody comes in and says, Adam, I got to tell you, I had a relapse on whatever behavior, right? I relapsed and I looked at porn and I really hate myself. I say, congratulations. And they go, what? And I say, congratulations, you just found a part of yourself that now needs to be fixed. And now you have the tools to fix it. So what are we going to do to fix that part? How are we going to fill that gap that you just found? How can we use this to make you a stronger man today? And that, oh man, that moves them forward, because then it's, okay, I found a weakness, let's fill it. I found this, the stone crumbled, build it up with a better stone. Congratulations, you found a part that you are now going to fix.
You just got better.
You just got better.
Yeah.
Let's do something about it.
We call it leveraging relapses. Like if you frame this correctly, you can actually leverage a relapse and it can catapult you forward in your recovery. A lot of people just don't have someone like Adam to guide them through it, or someone like our team, right? So that's a big deal. Framing it the right way makes a huge difference.
And I do actually like this even term that you guys use in terms of recovery. And this is where I think the definition of addiction is to change. It is truly a recovery, right? You actually can come back to where you've been before. You can fully recover and you can continue on as a new person. This is something that most people struggle with, right? They say, hey, exactly, once an addict, always an addict. And as soon as you even use the term addict, like I've had people in my life who were dependent and addicted to various substances, and I've seen some of them make really full recoveries, but that was only after they've closed the chapter, and they've closed the chapter and moved on. Now, in every single case I've seen, I truly have had to observe a conversation they've had with an entity that seemed like, that inner child concept. I really want to ask both of you guys about inner child work, because that is not something that most men even are aware of. So what exactly is it? Maybe Sathiya and then Adam, and why does it matter?
So the basic premise of inner child work is a lot of your wiring is established in the first 5 to 7 years of life. And everything that happens after that is sort of builds onto those early childhood experiences. So when you have a pornography addiction, you're 30 years old, you're a respected CPA, and on the outside, your life looks like it's put together, but you go home and pornography is the only thing you actually have to look forward to. The premise of inner child work is that if we could talk this through a little bit more deeply and actually ask, I love that question, Adam, you said, because we asked that too. What is pornography providing you, or what is it offering you? If we could start to ask some more probing questions, what we would find is that what's actually going on here has something to do with 7-year-old Steve, 5-year-old Steve. There was an experience where a need didn't get met, or maybe it was the presence of something that was abusive or toxic. Again, it's different for everyone. But the idea is, if we can repair from these inner child experiences, it's usually need deficiencies. If we can go back into these early formative experiences and kind of inject or supplement what was missing, the lack of closeness, the lack of affirmation, the lack of safety or security, if we can provide those in those and kind of reprocess those memories, then what happens is the next time that we encounter a situation where ordinarily it would land on top of that need deficiency, now that deficiency is no longer there and I can make a better decision. So that's the basic premise of inner child work. Adam, you're a wealth of knowledge, man. I'm sure you got some stuff.
Yeah, I did extensive training with inner child, but I never use the term inner child anywhere, because if you use that with most guys, they gag and throw up and then leave because they don't want to hear it. It sounds so stupid and so overly therapeutic. So guys at home, if you hate the term inner child, drop a comment below and let me know, because most guys tend to. But what it comes from largely is that concept of internal family systems. It's the idea that inside of you, you have pieces, and we visualize them almost as different characters. So when we say internal child, we mean you got hurt as a kid, something disappointed you, something pissed you off, something upset you, and part of you kind of it took a bad lesson, and then it got locked in. So now you always revert to anger because of that thing that happened as a child. So when we do inner child work, we say, well, what pieces of me are still stuck as a scared, angry, hurt kid? And then we can visualize it sometimes as an actual child, and we talk to them. Sometimes it's simply saying, this is myself as a child. But whatever is comfortable for the guys at home is, this is the part of me I need to heal because I never learned the proper lesson. So yes, let's reprocess it now as an adult through whatever means that might be. And let's fix that so that I'm a fully integrated adult instead of retaining wounded pieces from childhood. It is absolutely mandatory. Even if you hate the term inner child, much like I do, even if you dislike that, you must do this work. It's non-negotiable because you will be stuck at that point forever. And yes, you will relapse continuously because you are not an integrated man yet.
And if I can add another layer that makes inner child work really powerful, this will actually tie in some of the stuff we've been talking about, when I think about all the clients that we've guided through this process, and I'm thinking of like certain clients where it's like there's that revelation, like I had no idea that experience as a kid was so impactful. I had no idea how connected this was to my porn addiction. Most of those experiences, it's not just the internal family system. It's we need like a clinical term for this, but it's the internal spiritual family system. In other words, it's not just the mom and dad pieces or the siblings. It's actually inserting God into some of these moments, some of these events, and getting that need met or whatever that is, whatever is necessary, getting it from God. It very, very, very powerful, because a lot of people, when we drop the G word, and people think about God, especially in the context of a porn addiction, people think that God's angry, they're going to incur his wrath, he's judging them, all this kind of stuff. And when you reprocess some of these old memories, or like you said, you end up just in these scenarios that are not necessarily real, but they're reflective of your inner child. And God comes into the picture, and God provides you that word of encouragement or affirmation. God is there close to you, shielding you from, the words that maybe somebody was speaking over you. That can be really, really transformative, especially for people obviously who are faith-based.
It's astounding to most people to learn that God doesn't hate them. He's waiting for them.
Waiting for them to stop hating themselves?
Waiting for them to just back to Michelangelo, waiting for them to extend their hand just enough to make contact and touch. It's me when I'm sitting with my kids. I don't hate my kids when they do wrong things. I'm just waiting for them to come around so that I can give them a big hug and we can make it better, and then we can continue our life together. I don't want them to suffer.
And I'm kind of curious here, because both of you have said the same thing. And Adam, you work also a lot with dependencies. If it's dependencies on bad relationships, all the avoiding anxiety, like even if it's not substances or pornography or whatever, those are still kind of addictions in their own ways. And you both have said that in order for you to move past that and become liberated, become free, you must deal with your inner trauma, right? How do men nowadays deal with trauma? Do they get the support they need? Where can they get this type of support?
Sathiya, do you want to tackle that first?
Well, I mean, if guys are struggling with pornography or sexual misbehavior and they need help tackling trauma, they should really come and look at our stuff. This is our specialty, and this is what we do better than anyone else. I think regardless if people check our stuff out or not, and Adam, I would love to hear your take on this actually, but I think too many people are trying to heal trauma like with each other, and it's kind of the blind leading the blind. I think you need an expert. I think you need somebody who's specialized, somebody who's educated. We always tell people, like, if you're going to work with a professional, which everybody should do, you want somebody who's got the knowledge base. You want somebody who has the experience, act like the track record, and then you want somebody who ideally has a personal, they can identify with some of the stuff that you're looking for help with. So I think that's where I would start at least. I think people really should take this seriously and make sure that they're being picky about the people they're working with.
So when you asked me where do men get help, my first response was, who's helping men? Nobody. Men are not getting help. Men are just sitting there right now on their couch like, who do I go to? I'm alone. Loneliness is one of the biggest problems for men. So men are not getting help. Now, what I'll also add to that is throughout all of human history, where have men got help? That's a very different question. Men have got help from mentors. Men have got help from other men who have learned or have repositories of knowledge. Men have got help from people who have conquered things that they haven't conquered yet. So when I look at that, then my answer absolutely is get a mentor. Whether that's me, like walking through attachment issues, but just the other day, someone asked me, Adam, I really need to fix this porn problem that I have. I said, I know a man, his name is Sathiya. I'm going to give you his contact information. He is an expert in pornography. I am not an expert in it. I'm an expert in attachment theories and family relationships. He is an expert in dealing with pornography and all of the problems underlying it. Talk to him because he will guide you through it. And this guy like lit up because he finally had a mentor to turn to. He finally knew the person to go get directions and instructions from.
That's not the traditional model. The traditional model is go see a therapist.
That's not the traditional model. That's what we have built. That is crap that we have built over the last 140 years. Go get a therapist, right? Freud famously said, I'm going to create an army of secular pastors, and he wanted to replace religion. He wanted to replace people pastoral care. He wanted to replace mentorships. He wanted to replace fathers. He wanted to replace everything with this one magical therapist who will be everything for you and keep you dependent. Because he hated religion. He hated how people were dependent on that, and he wanted somewhere where you could just go get completely secular, isolated, no God, where you could just talk and have a confession, not actually be absolved, and just feel better about what you were doing. That's what he wanted to build, and that's what we have built here in America for therapy. We need structures where men are having accountability. We need to peel back what therapy has taken from us, and therapy shouldn't do 15 things. It should help you resolve the diagnosable issues you're going in for, and then you should leave. You don't go to your doctor for 15 years every week and say, well, maybe if there's something we can fix. You go to therapy for diagnoses, you go to mentors, coaches, and guides to get the assistance you need overcoming those challenges. Exactly like Sathiya.
Yep.
The reason he has specialized.
I got to jump in here.
Go.
We had a client. This is like probably maybe 2 or 3 months ago. We had a client come to us, and he had been seeing a therapist to treat his porn addiction for 5 years. Adam, what would you say if you were seeing a therapist for 5 years and you were still struggling with the same issue?
I have clients come in who have been in therapy for 20 years. Sometimes they have had 5 therapists, and now they are coming to me. Even when I was a therapist, I was the guy that they'd come in and say, Adam, I've seen 6 other therapists. No one's been able to help. I don't even think you're going to be able to help. You have 1 session. Should I even be here? And I had to actually give them the assistance and point them at humans in their life to speak to. Therapy is not a religion, and therapy is not a magical cure-all. If it is your cult, that's fine, but it is not supposed to be. Okay?
It's not fine. No, it's not fine because it's really misleading people. This client, in 1 session with us, he said he got more breakthrough, more help, more clarity than those 5 years combined.
I hear that all the time.
The same stuff.
I hear that all the time with my coaching clients. They're like, Adam, this 1 hour with you has been worth years of therapy, and I've learned more here. So thank you for being here.
It's crazy. It's crazy. They did a study, actually. They were examining psychotherapy at large, and they did kind of an evaluation over the last 30 years of the efficacy of psychotherapy in general. And what they found is the rate of efficacy for psychotherapy now compared to 30 years ago is literally exactly the same. We have not gotten better. We've just come up with new modalities like equestrian therapy or, whatever. Like we can reach more people. But therapy is therapy. Like, and I do think there's a place for therapists. Like I've definitely benefited from seeing therapists. But I do think like just saying, oh, you're a guy, you're struggling, go see a therapist. It's some of the worst advice you can give someone because usually they end up in these 5-year cycles and then they think there's something wrong with them, right? Because they think, well, I've been seeing this therapist. Therapy worked for all these other people, so-and-so said it was a good idea, so something must be wrong with me.
Yeah, everyone in the audience that we've offended so far, I recommend you go read a book called The Myth of Psychotherapy. It's available on Amazon right now. It walks you through exactly why, and I didn't write it. I don't have an affiliation with anything. Just it will open your eyes to about why therapy is so broken, why it is not doing what it's supposed to do, and why we need such better examples like men like Sathiya out here, like you, my friend, who is out here actually guiding men through their exact problems and then launching them into a better life, because that's where their answers are.
I appreciate that. I really do think, and Andrey, I know you and I have talked about this before as well. Like I think the coaching model there is actually the direction that things are really going in, because I've actually had this experience myself, even with my physical body. I started working with a personal trainer in the last 3-4 months, and again, like when I compare that to like group exercise or just working out with a buddy or whatever, having like a coach who's like, don't eat this, do this exercise, you know, it's just, he's moved me into action that I know I should have been taking for the last 5 years, but I'm finally doing it. And I think that's what is missed in therapy a lot, and why, again, coaching, that kind of model is really powerful for getting people to actually change their lives.
One question for you, Sathiya. Okay, Michael Jordan, right? Like the best basketball player who's ever lived. When he set out to become the best basketball player who's ever lived, did he hire a physical therapist for his body, or did he hire a coach to help him achieve outcomes that he was looking to do?
Right, a nutritional coach, and one for his endurance, one for his physical strength. Like, again, just that specialized coaching, like that. If you really care about yourself and you really want to further your life, I think that's the direction things are going.
There are two things to consider, especially when it comes to therapists, right? If you're going to a therapist in order to solve a particular issue, it's like going to a doctor, right? But would you really go to a doctor who was sick, obese, and miserable? Like, you know, your doctor rolls in with an oxygen tank in a wheelchair, you know, and not to disrespect anyone who may have disabilities or that circumstance, like that happens, but like you would instantly have less trust for them. When you go to a therapist, you know nothing about them. They don't say anything about their personal life. They can be on have all sorts of issues and have all sorts of problems, and they will be manifesting themselves to you.
Marriage therapists have the highest divorce rate of all therapists.
Like every psychologist I've ever worked with is messed up. Really, and I've worked with a bunch of them. Right? It is what it is. But when you go to a coach, the coach actually has to manifest that. You're not going to go to a fat coach, you know, if you're going to a trainer, right? You're not going to go to somebody who is, you know, dependent on something you're trying to get off of. You're actually going to somebody who has accomplished what you want, and you're actually going to be able to benefit from it because, you know, you've seen they've done this before. They have the knowledge. They repeatedly do this with other people, and that is what builds trust and prevents you from getting bad advice. So it's number one. And number two is actually a rule that I've learned from my work in organizational change management. That is that systems tend to revert back to their original state unless you can change them sufficiently in enough ways that they simply don't know how to go back, in which case they must change. Humans are complex systems. They work exactly the same way. So if I was coaching myself and I have this issue when I go do physical training, I can only get to a certain point, then a plateau, because I don't know what to do. I already have all my answers. I tried them out. If I can't get above this, I have no answers because I don't know what I don't know, right? And if you actually go work with a coach, and a coach who actually is trying to get you to an outcome as opposed to give you relief, which is what happens with therapy, then you're actually looking to get sufficient change, and they will make you change. And this is the part that therapy gets wrong. It doesn't make you do anything. So coaching makes you do things. You push as a coach, you guide, you encourage, you ask uncomfortable questions. That is not a therapy modality as I understand it. Is that correct?
The therapy modalities that actually push forward in any way, shape, or form are so unpopular and barely tapped whatsoever. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy. You're supposed to be using it in very specific, structured ways. Almost nobody ever does. Yeah. The machines are churning out hundreds of thousands of therapists who say, I'm a good listener. And then you have humanistic theories that come in and say the client is the expert. I threw up every time I heard that in my graduate program.
It's a despicable notion.
The client is the expert. No, they're not. They're coming to you because they're miserable. They're coming to you because they don't know what to do. They need answers. No, you will never provide them with answers. Your job is to let them find their own answer. How long will that take? It will take as many years as it takes.
And we tried that. And we tried that during the opiate epidemic. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. The clients would show up to a doctor, a physical doctor, and say, my back hurts, my this hurts. Then they would get prescribed medication. They say, does this hurt? They go, yeah, and they give them more, and they give them more. Next thing you know, you have a whole generation of people who are dependent on opiates. So we had a whole generation of people who are dependent on benzodiazepines, barbiturates, all of these things. Now we have a generation who are dependent on methamphetamines, like Adderall, right? And it's just like, what are we doing? Like, if every time the client is the expert and the client is in pain, the only thing he's going to do is get away from the pain. Yeah. He's never going to fix the source.
It's a great business model, though.
It is.
It's a subscription model.
Keeps your clients around long term. Yeah. The other interesting thing, and Adam, you would be able to comment on this probably better than I could, but my understanding is typically your typical therapist, and this is, we're on my soapbox now, man. This drives me crazy. So when people come to us and they say, I've seen a therapist, my first question I ask is, did your therapist do any specialized training to help people with pornography addiction? And usually their answer is either no or I don't know. Because that's the honest truth, right? Is if you go through your typical education cycle, no one's talking about pornography addiction or teaching you how to treat it. In fact, in academic circles, pornography addiction is still debated whether or not it's a legitimate addiction, which is kind of crazy, but another story for another day. But I kind of liken it to, if you had a toothache, are you going to call your doctor, your general practitioner who has, a little bit of knowledge about everything, or are you going to call your dentist who specializes in teeth? Obviously, you're going to call your dentist. And you know that if you did end up calling your doctor, you're going to get a way crappier answer because they're not your dentist, right? And I think it's the same thing. Like if somebody's struggling with relationships, like, yeah, you can go to your typical therapist, but why wouldn't you just go see Adam Lane Smith, who specializes in attachment and family relationships? Like, to me, I think it's just, we've misled people. And a lot of therapists are being set up for this broken system. It's not actually therapist's fault. It's the system.
But there's a lot of components to the system. A lot of it is insurance billing. It really is, right? Just as a lot of times with doctors.
Do you know how diagnoses are decided?
No, tell me.
So in the most recent, the DSM-5, there were almost fist fights because they reclassified autism and Asperger's. They collapsed Asperger's into autism spectrum disorder to force insurance companies to start taking it on. And the insurance companies came in and started arguing, we want this diagnosis, not this one. Insurance companies were now settling which one was a diagnosis. And then the field of psychology almost split. Psychiatry refused to work with psychotherapy anymore for a time because psychotherapy was transitioning so much over into the insurance model that psychiatry said, this is absolutely lowest integrity. You are failing your clients. We will not follow this. So they threatened to split off and break the field. They managed to come back and they had to all lobby together, but the insurance companies are covering a lot of this. Yes, it's not individual therapists' fault. Some of them are awful, but the system is so catastrophically broken. We have a medical model of you are sick. We don't know why. Here's some medication. Come in and talk to us for 6 years about how sad you feel. That's the system that we have built. That is the mass production model of American psychology today.
Is that what you left?
Yeah.
That is a massive reason I had to leave the field. That's a gigantic reason that I coach instead. I could not ethically follow through with that subscription model anymore. I would roll people through so fast and fixing them that I was getting in trouble with the clinic I was working in. They didn't like that I was rolling people through and fixing them that fast. It wasn't financially sound as a model for them. I had to leave the industry.
And that's why I actually love, Sathiya, what you do, right? Your story is phenomenal, right? And you basically said, I have found one issue. And I've helped 10,000 men, over 10,000 men, fix this one issue. And then I listened. And then I asked people what they wanted. And then I developed the next solution. And this liberated man work that you're doing is the next solution to the next problem. But you're not saying you're going to go fix the world with everything and this is it and they have to subscribe to you forever and ever and ever. It's probably going to be what? Another 3 or 6 months program. And the goal is you take something, you fix it. You take something, you fix it, and you learn and you evolve along with the needs of the people that you're helping. And that's fantastic. That's the difference.
The only thing I'd correct about that is I do believe I'm fixing the world. We're crazy enough to believe that if you change the man, you change the world. I legitimately believe that with all my heart. And so it actually drives a lot of what we do and the way we've structured it, which you just, it's like my program as well as I do, Andrey. I love it. It's like if guys can change, if they can have a heart transformation, they can show up better in their relationships. They can live with purpose and with passion and really go after the things that they feel called to do. The world becomes a better place. And actually, there's a lot of people in this world who don't want guys to do any of those things. I mean, that I don't even know if we want to go down that road.
But I disagree with you because what I'm trying to say here is this. You yourself are not changing the world. You're enabling and helping and healing people to define that world. And this is a big difference. And this is something that a lot of therapists, a lot of psychologists come out. It is me, 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 I. And that ego game is what makes them so stuck in their ways. Psychology doesn't change, not because it doesn't want to, because evidently even with this example, psychiatry said no. Everybody could say no, but they don't, because ultimately they're trying to push their business and their model and their education and their degree and their diploma and their license. You guys aren't pushing anything. You guys aren't running around saying, I have all the answers. You're saying, hey, I know this problem. I'm an attachment specialist. I'm the recovery and addiction specialist. And that's it. And that's all you guys do. And collaboratively, that is the community effect where all of these masters come together and they all build something beautiful. One person does not build a palace. It requires many different trades and many different skills. And you guys are starting to create the community that is now going to be building the next stage of humanity by focusing and knowing what your actual purpose is and following that. So that's very, very cool.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it's funny. I was actually just we were going through some recent stories of just clients that have come through and some of the success they've had and whatever. And I always have this. I always get this when I kind of look through our client stories. I just think, man, we have the best clients. Like, we just get the best guys in the world who are just like, they're serious about their relationships, they're serious about their integrity, they're serious about their spiritual life. Like, I'll brag about my clients all day, and I do appreciate the distinction there, Andrey, because you're right. I know that actually there's very little that we can actually do. We just have to trust we attract the right people who are going to go through our system, be transformed, and then go transform the world. And that's been the case so far, and we're excited to keep doing it.
Amazing. And as we tie off, guys, when each of you to answer this one question, what are the 3 things you would recommend, be it as steps or just kind of general points that you would recommend to a man who is struggling with a dependency, be it a dependency on bad relationships or pornography or substances or work or whatever it is that's keeping them trapped and away from going down this liberated path? Maybe if Adam, you go first, and Sathiya?
What are 3 things? I'll give him 3 questions. 3 questions to ask yourself if you don't have a Sathiya or an Adam in your life to ask you. What is this thing doing for me? What is it nurturing? What is it filling? What gap, whatever, what need? Because there's something there, right? The organism is always right. Whatever it's doing, there's a need there. So what is this doing for me? Number 2, what might fill that hole better? What might fill that gap better? What might sate you more? What might satisfy you? Where's the real need, and what other options are there? And number 3, who can help me make this transition? What mentor, what guide, what friend, what uncle, what anything? Who can I go to get accountability and guidance and sometimes just a swift boot up the butt? Whatever you need, get involved with a human and have a relationship. Those are the 3 questions that I think.
Is that your therapy training speaking about the boot up the butt?
Sometimes a man needs that, and he is grateful for it afterward. Even if his butt's sore afterward from the kicking.
That's right. The Batman slap.
He launches forward into a better life.
Nice. Thank you.
It's true. I would say, my 3 things. Number 1, I think everybody should have a journal. I think journaling is a really good way to start, and it's very low cost to entry, very safe way to kind of get started in the process. Just start journaling. Second thing is, I would say, plug into communities. Like, the fact that you've made it this far into a podcast like this is amazing. Find platforms like this and really engage. Don't just watch, but engage with the people. Comment, figure out ways that you can start to connect with other people. Like we talked about earlier, connection is so important. And then I would say, with whatever means you have, even if it is a bit of a sacrifice, get an expert in your corner. Whether it's just you buy a course or program, or you do some coaching or whatever it is, that expert guidance is the fastest way to get your desired outcome. And again, a lot of people, I think, they'll say, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I have the resources or whatever. Everybody has something that they can invest in their development. And I just think people would be crazy not to.
And that's not even us speaking as coaches, because I have coaches, I have mentors. I happily pay for coaching because I understand exactly the benefit of it. I can't get better in all these different areas till I have an expert showing me what to do.
Yeah, but there's also shouldn't be any stigma against speaking about yourself as a coach. You guys have a model. You believe in that model. That model has helped tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. I feel like it'd be a crime to not promote it, right? You guys are actually speaking against yourself if you say, don't. Actually do, because you guys are doing this because you believe that this is the best thing out there, and that is the next iteration. You guys are collecting with tremendous responsibility and a lot of effort, a lot of financial investment, a lot of time investment. You're creating this next stage of human development. And you absolutely should be crazy about it. I'm pretty sure that Henry Ford, when he invented the automobile, he went and talked to everybody about it and said it's the best thing ever. He didn't say, maybe you should have a horse. He said, no, you should have a damn car, and it has to be black, right? And so he had that conversation. And I think it's actually great that you guys can come out and firmly say, no, that is the best thing that you should do, because that's the best thing that we have ever come up with. And I would actually like to challenge anybody else, and if you disagree with me in the comments, please tell me what is better than coaching. please go ahead. I would love to hear this, not just because, I'm challenging you guys, but also because truly I would like this to be a conversation where people can find what is going to help the most people. Some people might come in and say, hey, ayahuasca retreats, and they have. We've actually had conversations with people who come from that field of work, even on this podcast. Some people might say hardcore religion. Some people might say exercise. But that's exactly why these conversations have to happen, so we can find eventually what is the best format for us to help people who are struggling with relationships, with dependencies, with addictions, with all these problems. So everybody, please comment below. And while you do that, I really strongly encourage you guys to come out and check out Sathiya and his work. Sathiya, where can we find you?
So we talked about the newsletter. That's an easy place for people to just get little nuggets delivered to their inbox. But I'd love everybody who's watching this, if you're serious about recovery, you want to learn the system that we keep talking about, the best place to do that is actually my book. It's called The Last Relapse. It's available everywhere that books are sold, and we donate all those profits to charity. Or you can get a free copy at thelastrelapsebook.com. Just my gift to the world. So those are the best places to start. And I have had Adam on my podcast before, Man Within, and so people want to check that out.
What about on socials? Do you have a website? Do you have an Instagram account? Where do we find you?
Yeah, we're very active on Instagram, and we do respond to all the messages that come through. So if you have other questions from this interview, things you want to know more about, you guys can put the handle in there. It's Sathiya Sam. We'd love to chat with you guys there.
I will say, for most of the people who are listening at home, I'll advocate for the audience. A lot of them, they like to, rather than jump in with a coach, they'd rather take like a video course or something like that first. Do you have any video courses you offer for men who are looking to become more liberated in this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stuff I just talked is the best place for people to get started. But yeah, we do have things that don't involve coaching. People can just get our content. There's ways for people to do that, but I think people can start probably with those platforms, at least to get the ball rolling.
And I gotta say, the new site you just launched looks fantastic. So it's sathiyasam.com. Looks very sharp.
SathiyaSam.com.
So that's actually where you should sign up for the newsletter. When I popped in there the other day, I was quite impressed. There's a great blog there as well, and there's a lot of videos that are coming in. Your podcast is on there. You have a new YouTube channel that launched not too long ago. So there's a lot of work you were doing, Sathiya, to get this message out. I'm quite happy with it. So really wish you the best of luck with pushing it through, and we'll be helping you as much as we can. Might even have some referrals that I know that might send to you. So.
Oh, thanks, guys. Guys, I appreciate the support, and this was a fun conversation.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Adam, where do we find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith on every platform. If you search my name, you will find me. If you want to find video content, I am at Attachment Adam on YouTube, at Attachment Adam on Instagram. I have my website, adamlanesmith.com, with courses on fixing your attachment challenges. And yes, I offer coaching on there as well. I'd be happy to work with you guys.
Fantastic. Guys, you can find me at Andrey Korikov on Instagram. The work we do with content creators like Adam and like Sathiya. It is on veritascreative.media, and you guys can check that out. And in the meantime, this has been a fantastic episode. We really appreciate the fact that you guys came in and gave a shot to the idea that you could too become a liberated man, or maybe a man in your life can become liberated from dependencies, from addictions. They can recover from all sorts of problems they might be having. And I think that's something that you should share with them. And if somebody you know, it's somebody you love, it's somebody who can benefit from this message, please send this episode along. It will help us really get in front of the people who really need this help the most, and it'll also help them become the person and the man that they're meant to be. So with that in mind, thank you for listening to I Wish You Knew. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.